It's the Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
So let's just be really clear. The science is settled. There's a couple of old school stick-in-the-muds in the scientific community who still think that maybe we can get away with a tap on the bum. But when it comes to science and empiricism, there is no argument to be made.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
Oh boy. It feels really weird to be on the podcast this morning talking about being on the TV last night.
You're violating someone else's
and you're
body.
saying that this is a response, this is a solution. It's maybe the last tool, but it's a tool. That's what you're saying. It doesn't sit well with me.
We would never smack our child. We feel very strongly about this. She's a little child. We're an adult. It is a form of abuse.
G'day, this is Justin Coulson. I'm here with Kylie, my wife, and mum to our 6 daughters. Kylie, the first episode of Parental Guidance. What did you think? You've never seen me on the telly before like that.
Well, I think that the kids were a little bit shocked at how much makeup Dad was wearing.
I can't believe you brought that up. Thank you so much.
You did look different.
Yeah, and my hair. Like, for any of the hair and makeup people who are listening, I'm not saying anything negative. I'm not used to my hair looking like that.
It reminded me a little bit of Luke Perry, back in the...
Beverly Hills 90210.
Yeah. But all of that aside, what an experience, and some really, really tough topics were addressed last night.
Well, the big one, and we've just got to go straight into some audio from the show. The big one was smacking.
We do use smacking as a form of discipline. It's one of the tools in the toolbox.
Smack quickly communicates that is not okay. There are boundaries, there are consequences. You can't just do whatever you want.
We see a smack as one tool in a parenting toolbox of options, and it's by no means the first tool that comes out of that toolbox.
First of all, this is a controversial topic, okay, and let's just acknowledge that. And in that space, it's good to listen and to hear story. So I was raised in a household where my parents smacked me, and Miriam experienced the same. Now, I do not hold any resentment or bitterness to my parents for that. In fact...
Stockholm Syndrome.
No, just hang on. Let me sit a chance to talk. So I actually felt that was a fine form of correction, and as I reflected upon that and my upbringing, I thought, well, that was a positive tool, and so I've used that with our children.
For us, we don't want to, lash out in anger and hurt them. It's not, that's not the purpose. We make sure that we have gone through the other different tools and tried different ways, and if there is a situation that has that purposeful defiance, and we feel that in that particular situation that's the most effective tool, we ask the child to come to us. We don't chase them around the house. We don't try and pin them down or hold them. We ask them to come to us, and the smack is delivered on the bottom.
This was a really, really tough conversation, and especially for Andrew and Miriam, they were put under the spotlight in a really difficult way.
Yeah, I think, though, that it's a conversation that we need to have. And I'm so grateful that they were the brave souls who put their head above the parapet and let everyone shoot at it, I guess. I mean, really, really hard.
But I just loved Andrew's humility at the end when he just acknowledged that this was a game changer for him. It had really made him think.
I've been challenged to think, how do I correct? Is it the best way? And I suppose my experience has still been what it has been, okay? Overall, this tool has been a positive thing. But we want to be the best parents that we can be. And we want to love our children and see them grow. And you don't want to do anything as a parent that will give baggage to your kids. You try and love. It's hard, it really is, to try and get it right. And so we're doing our best to do. And I think parents want the best for their kids, and so this is a good conversation to have, and for us it's been hard but helpful.
So Kylie, let's talk. about smacking, because Andrew and Miriam have started what I'm hoping is literally going to be the catalyst of a new spanking or smacking debate in this country. Not that we need to be having a debate. Like, the debate should be over. The science is settled. But I think that maybe this can be the catalyst for sparking a change that can mean a new generation of kids grows up with a new expectation of how their parents will not be manhandling them.
I think the reality is we do the best we can until we know better, right?
Yeah. And we've got an opportunity.
This conversation has allowed Andrew and Miriam to recognise that there's a better way.
So I actually have spoken with Andrew just recently, and he still reflects on that conversation regularly, and he has acknowledged that it has changed his parenting. We are hoping to have him on the podcast in a couple of weeks' time, though, once the show's over. So I'm not going to reveal too much, but lovely, lovely guy, fabulous, just so engaged with his kids. Let's have the smacking conversation. Can we do that?
Okay.
All right. So the first.
Hit me.
No, I see what you did there. That wasn't funny. That was terrible. So the first thing that I want to highlight is the following. The Royal Australasian College of Physicians have actually proposed an amendment to make it a criminal offence for parents to hit their children. So what's really going on here is that when we look at the science is settled. There's a couple of old school stick in the muds in the scientific community who still think that maybe we can get away with a tap on the bum. But when it comes to science and empiricism, there is no argument to be made. There's literally no debate. The data shows clearly smacking is ineffective.
Well, I agree with all of that. I actually think that making it illegal or making it against the law is actually not helpful for parents. There is so much pressure on parents already to make good choices and to do the right thing. And to have that sitting over their head, I just think is not helpful.
Let's have a look at the data on that, though, because there's a really important point to be made around that, and that is that the people who are going to be most in trouble for this are the people who can least afford it and who are least likely to know what to do. And this is going to sound politically completely incorrect, but I'm just reporting on data. So the data actually shows us who's doing the smacking. Oh, by the way, in Australia, around about 50% of parents say...
So let's spend the money...
to help them.
That's exactly right.
Totally. But the thing is, they're not going to spend the money on the education unless there's a legislative reason to do it. So we've got to bring the legislation in and say we've got to make smacking illegal. But then instead of enforcing it with fines and with jail and all those horrible scary things.
It won't be that. They'll just take their children away.
No. And instead of enforcing it with docs stepping in and saying you can't have your children, you're unfit to be a parent, what they need to do is step in with high quality education, good quality stuff. So here's what we've got, data on who's doing the smacking. The research tells us that low income parents are significantly more likely to smack their kids than high income parents. Now
this is intergenerational as well, though. We're dealing with parents who, as children,
were smacked.
That's
right. So people who are smacked often continue that, but there's some who break the cycle. What we also know, though, is, and I'm not picking on people with lower incomes. I mean, we've been there for most of our lives while I've been studying and trying to get happy families going and that sort of thing. What it suggests, though, is, I mean, I reckon it could be related to a lack of knowledge, or it could be related to stress from financial pressure. It could be low levels of support. The data also shows that race and nationality and lower levels of education and higher levels of religiosity are also predictive of who's going to smack. Although it gets really complicated, and the data shows the complication. But essentially, a politically indelicate reality is that the biggest predictors of who's going to smack are those who have got low income, low education, high religiosity, especially in countries where religious participation is low, or being from minority cultures or races or nationalities. Now, having said that, I know plenty of very well-heeled, well-educated, non-religious Anglo-Australians who are all for giving their kid a whack on the backside if they don't measure up. So there's a lot of people that feel like smacking's okay, but the data says smacking's harmful and it doesn't point to any positive outcomes. And I'm not talking child abuse. I'm talking about what I was on a radio interview last week and a radio announcer said, but surely a swat on the bum's okay. I'm talking about the data on the swat on the bum. It's just a tap. The data shows that the more we do it, the more likely there are negative outcomes. Obviously, if you do it once or twice because you've had a lousy day, I'm never going to endorse or encourage that, but sometimes that stuff happens in real life. And
we're human.
Yeah, and that's probably not going to predict any tremendously bad outcomes for our kids. There's many more things that we need to be worried about. But with very few exceptions, there's no researcher who's out there that's going to encourage any kind of physical hitting. It's just not right. The Royal Australasian College of Physicians has stated in their official position paper that, quote, it believes that physical punishment is an outdated practice. And the American Psychological Association has thrown its weight behind the Stop Smacking movement as well. We've got to do something about it.
Well, let's take a break, and after we come back, let's give people some hope, some solutions. How can we work through this and change what we're doing?
It's the Happy Families Podcast.
Are screens creating tension at home? Tweens, Teens and Screens is a webinar to guide families to healthy, safe super screen solutions. Buy it today at happyfamilies.com.au/shop.
It's the Happy Families Podcast, the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now. And today we are tackling the big one, smacking.
Yeah, after Andrew and Miriam's very, very challenging episode 1 of Parental Guidance on Channel 9 last night.
We see a smack as one tool in a parenting toolbox.
Whew. Wow. We need to talk about it. Hey, you know what, though? Before we talk about what we should do instead, I think we just need to – I've talked about the evidence, but I want to make an appeal to logic around this as well. So let me hit you with a scenario, if you can, again, forgive the hit pun. When a big child hits a small child in the playground, what do we call that child?
Is it they're a bully?
Yeah, exactly. That's what we say. So 5 years later, that little kid or that big child, maybe he was in grade 6, now he's in grade 11, and he punches a woman for a handbag. So what would we call him then?
A delinquent?
Yeah, or a mugger. And later still, when he slugs a workmate who insults him, we call him a troublemaker. But when he becomes a father and his tiresome, disobedient or disrespectful child bothers him and he hits that child, we call him a disciplinarian. That's what our culture still does. And I can't help but wonder why it is that I'm not allowed to hit another adult, even one who's being completely unreasonable and who needs to be quote unquote disciplined, without being charged. I'm not allowed to hit my dog, even if it pees on the carpet or the rug, but I can still whack my kids legally. In this country, it's still legal for me to do that. Like I weigh vastly, multiple times what a child weighs. I'm far bigger and stronger, but the law doesn't call it abuse. And I know parents will say, oh yeah, it's just a gentle tap, but let's put this into perspective, right? So let's imagine that you're dealing with a 3-year-old. So you're going to be at least twice the height and let's say, 8 times the weight of a 3-year-old. Imagine if somebody who was twice your height, let's say you're 160 centimetres, so somebody that's 3.2 metres tall, and let's say the average Australian adult weighs 75 kilos, and let's just go 4 times the weight. So that's 300 kilos. A 300 kilo, 3 metre giant stands over you and says, I'm just going to give you a tap. Like, as an adult, I think that I'd wet my pants with fear. You know what I mean? Like, that's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. And that's what we do to our kids. And again, the data. I mean, that's the appeal to logic, but the data shows that it doesn't work. So I just think we need to make legislative changes. We need to get this conversation going. I know that you think that that's a really heavy way to bring it in, and we don't necessarily agree on this, but I think this is what the country needs. And by the way, more than 50 countries around the world now have legislation that says not okay to hit kids. And everyone's like, oh, you can't do that. Well, they said that about seatbelts in the 1970s. And what a difference that seatbelt law has made. And in the course of a generation, everyone's mind has changed. And now you wouldn't dream of getting into a car without a seatbelt. It's protective.
Well, clearly we don't have any say over legislation or whether or not it will be...
Oh, I'm working on that. Believe me.
Whether or not it will actually come about or not, but we can help parents. So, Dr. Justin Coulson, TV expert.
Oh, come on, cut it out. Don't be like that.
How do we help parents find better tools to use?
Okay, well, I think the first thing to do is we've got to remember what the word discipline means. A lot of people think that discipline means that we're supposed to punish our kids. But if you look up punishment, the word actually means that you're going to exact retribution. You're going to make somebody pay a price because you don't like what they've done. And punishment is a really lousy teacher, a really lousy disciplinarian.
Well, it does teach.
Well,
but it teaches our children all the wrong things.
The wrong stuff, exactly. So it teaches the kids that we're scary, that they need to be much sneakier next time, and that
that they're not safe with us.
Yeah, and they're not seen.
They can't trust us to take care of them, to keep them safe.
Okay, so the word discipline literally means teaching, guiding and instructing. It's showing somebody a better path. It's showing them the way. So if you're a disciple of someone, you've been disciplined in their way of doing things, you follow their path. So if we're going to discipline our kids, what that really means is we're going to say to our kids, we want to help you to make better choices, which means that we've got to be calm and kind when we discipline. Not yelling and angry and what I call pufferfish parenting, where we blow ourselves up as big as we can to eliminate the threat that our child's posing to our well-being and our sanity. So a few things that you can do. Number one, gentle reminders. And Kylie, we've really perfected this in our house. This is something that you've really taken on board over the years. The gentle reminder is, well, you say it to me all the time about my shoes and socks and the kids' shoes and socks. You literally say the name of the person.
Your shoes.
And that's about it. And the person goes, oh, sorry, I forgot. And they put them away. And if they don't, you walk up to them and look them in the eyes and smile and say,
your shoes.
And guess what? They get moving really quickly.
Except for one child. Her shoes are still sitting where they were 3 days ago.
There is a developmental reality to this, and sometimes little kids will struggle a little more than the big kids. The next one is the 3 E's of effective discipline. Now, we've got podcasts and articles and book chapters and all sorts of things about this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But this is really the most effective way to discipline kids. You can't do it in the moment. You can't do it when there's an audience. You just wait until things have calmed down. And once everyone's rational again, you sit down and say, hey, I want to explore what went on there. What's going on for you? And try to step into their world. You don't explore with an agenda. You just say, help me to understand why this is such a struggle. Then you explain your expectation. This is where you draw a line in the sand and say, hey, kiddo, in our home, we don't hit our siblings, or we don't slam doors, or we don't do whatever it is that they did. And then you empower them. You say, so what do you reckon we should do to get this right next time? Explore, explain, empower. Much more effective, much more likely to internalize. And you know what? It doesn't even take that much longer. But the results are far more long-lasting.
What's number 3?
The third one that I'm going to mention is really simple, and that is just be in the moment with them. So if you've got a child who's angry or being challenging or being disobedient, step into their world for a bit and say, you seem to be struggling. What can I do to help? Like literally be there with them and ask, how can I help you right now? How do we fix this? Where do we go from here? That approach is going to be far more effective than yelling and screaming and shouting and threatening and taking the iPad off them for a week or giving them a whack. Any of those things are far less effective compared to just being there with them, having the compassion and the perspective to teach, guide and instruct rather than to yell, scream, shout and inflict punishment.
It's interesting. The other night we had one of our children come up the stairs. They were very unhappy with what had just happened. We'd asked them to turn the TV off. They didn't like that. The sister had gone down, turned the TV off for us.
They hate it when one of their siblings starts being the parent.
And she walked up the stairs and she just exploded.
She did. She kind of went like this.
Screamed at the top of her head.
I took my microphone away then.
And the knee-jerk reaction was to scream and yell and rant with her.
Well, you were actually brilliant. I'm the parenting expert, but in that moment I was exhausted. It had been a huge week, a huge day. And I said, right, that's it. And I started to walk towards her and you just reached out and grabbed my arm. Or you didn't even grab my arm. You just put your arm across my body and said, just leave her.
She walked down the hallway. She slammed her door. And about 3 minutes later,
literally,
she walked out with a smile on her face and she got on with it.
She actually jumped in the bath and started singing songs. Like that's what she'd been asked to do, go and have a bath. And she just went and did it.
And what I love is children have this ability to just feel all of their emotions and they feel them really, really big. But what often happens when they're in that situation is we try to push them through it too fast because we don't want that emotion. We don't want the behaviour that it's creating. And what we've seen, especially with this child, is just letting her have the space to express herself.
Oh, gee, you've just reminded me. It's the metaphor of the train going through the tunnel. If you try to reach down through the mountain and pull the train out through the top of the mountain, you just make a really big mess. But if you let that train go through the tunnel, it comes out the other side and everything, you just get on with life. And then we could have a really simple conversation with her, hey, what was going on before? What's the expectation? What are you going to do next time?
And it is such a beautiful, teachable moment when we do that.
Wow. So Parental Guidance, it's going to keep us talking for the next couple of weeks, I think. Tonight's episode, I think, is the most confronting episode of the whole series, and it is hard to watch. I can't tell you any more than that right now, but if you missed episode 1, catch up on the Channel 9 website. You can get all the info there and watch Parental Guidance tonight. If you care about your kids' safety, this is one you cannot miss. The Happy Families podcast, as always, is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. And if you'd like more info about making your family happier, please visit us at happyfamilies.com.au, where you'll find all the information you need to know about the Happy Families memberships. Because a happy family doesn't just happen.